Melissa with Melissa's Creations. Today I am so really very truly excited to share with you this card. This is such a fun card, and I used a lot of materials from the January Paper Pumpkin Kit Heartfelt Love Notes. Can we just, for just a second, I mean, look at how beautiful that shimmer is on that copper embossed piece of vellum. This is the stained glass technique, and I'm really excited to show you how I achieved this look. Let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to start today by pulling some of the items out of the Paper Pumpkin Kit that we are going to use on our card. I am definitely using some of the stamps in here. I'm using the Be Mine stamp right there. We're also going to use a couple of these rich raspberry enamel dots. Now this originally had half Flirty Flamingo and half rich raspberry. I used all of the pink, most of the purple. There's a couple left that we're going to get to play with. I'm also using the metallic edge ribbon, and notice how this is vanilla or white, and on our card it's raspberry. Fun tip coming up for you on that shortly. So this is not included in the kit, but I just stuck it in here so that I knew where it was and I would have it. It's just a piece of vellum that is cut to size. We'll go over that in a moment. And then this is something that most people would probably just toss in the recycle or the trash bin. This is the negative from when you punch out the labels that were included in the kit. And I saw this when I was doing my kit, and I'm thinking to myself, that would make such a beautiful stained glass window. So that's what I did. I saved my pieces so that I could make a stained glass window. So you're going to need one of those. This is regularly twice as long. I just chopped it in half. And we're also going to use one of the pocket cards from this kit to cut out our label right here. And you can see that I've already done a couple of other alternate cards with this as well. I just love this piece so much. I'm going to be so sad when it gets all used up, but that's how it goes, right? If you're a Paper Pumpkin subscriber, I believe that right now at this moment in time, this refill kit is available. So might want to head over there and snag up some more. And then I have 2 more of these, so I can make 2 more of these stained glass cards if I wanted to. That's where these labels came from. They popped right out of this sheet of labels. And I just thought that was fun, and I like to use as much as I can out of these kits. So that is what we are doing. Let's get started with our other materials. So I have a standard card base here. This is a long card base, so it measures 4 1/4 by 11. I'm going to give it a score at 5 1/2. And there is our card base. Now I have a piece of Whisper white cardstock that I'm going to mat onto the front of my card. So I want this piece to measure 4 by 5 1/4. So I'm just going to trim this down to 4 and 5 1/4. Now we also have our piece of vellum as well as our scrap piece from our Paper Pumpkin Kit. Now this piece here measures about 3 5/16. It's just right around there. So we just want to make sure that our vellum is cut just slightly smaller, not much. This piece is actually almost exactly the same size, and it's difficult on this piece because when you cut it in half, if you don't cut it in exactly the right spot, you just get the tiniest little border here. And I want my card to be as symmetrical as possible. So I'm going to just try cutting off a tiny bit from the edge here to kind of even up. And we're going to attempt for 3 1/4. There we go. I think that will do it. That should work fine. So now our piece of vellum measures just over 3 1/4, so it's just about 3 3/8 by just about 4 7/8. So it's pretty darn close to the same size as our piece here. Now we chopped a little bit off of the side, so I'm just going to chop a little bit more off. So let's do 3, just a tick under 3 1/4. Okay, I think that will work beautifully. So you want to kind of make sure that this is going to be kind of a random size. It depends on how you cut it and where it's cut. So your vellum needs to be just slightly smaller than that scrap piece. Now, if you are using a standard piece of cardstock and cutting out your own shapes to make your own stained glass, maybe you're using one of our pretty label punches or something similar to that, you can definitely get this technique by punching out your own design. Just make sure that when you do your design, try and see if you can get it to fit on a standard card mat that is 4 inches by 5 1/4 inches. I think that would look lovely if you could get it to be the same size as your card. So let's move on with our stained glass technique. So I'm bringing in my Stampin' Pierce mat for this step, and I have my vellum here. We're going to be using our Versamark watermark stamp pad, as well as the Petal palette stamp set. So for our stained glass, we're going to use this beautiful rose, along with this little guy right here. So I'm going to bring in some of my acrylic blocks so I can get those stamps mounted. And then we're going to be embossing these with copper embossing powder. Now you definitely want to use your embossing buddy for this. So we'll grab him out. And we have our copper embossing powder here. Almost out. Definitely need a refill on that guy. All right. So I'm going to take my embossing buddy and run that all over the surface of that vellum, just to make sure that I get a really nice, clean embossing and I don't have any stray powders hanging out. I'm going to use my Versamark watermark stamp pad and ink up my rose piece. Oh, it's a little slippery. Let me clean off the back of that real quick. So we're going to ink up that stamp in Versamark nice and well. Make sure you get a lot of that ink on there. And then we're going to start by stamping up in the upper right corner. Now it's okay to go off of the sheet slightly. And remember, depending on what your stained glass window piece looks like, mine has a large circle in the center. So I'm not going to see a big chunk that's in the middle. So just keep that in mind when you're stamping, and don't be afraid to stamp off the edges of your cardstock. All right, so I have my first rose stamped. I'm going to spread my copper embossing powder over that, and then we're going to heat this up with our heat tool on the low setting. The nice thing about Stampin' Up's heat tool is that there's 2 settings, and when you're embossing on vellum, I haven't come across any issues, but I definitely like to emboss with the low setting to make sure that the vellum doesn't warp too much. So I'm going to stamp, emboss, and I'm just going to repeat that until I have my stained glass window done. Now that we have all of that beautifully embossed in our copper, we're going to use our Stampin' blends to start coloring in our stained glass. So I'm using Rich Razzleberry Light and Dark to do my flowers, and then I'm using Old Olive Light and Dark to do my leaves. So I'm going to take the brush tip and I'm just starting with the dark, and this part is just kind of fun. You just kind of get to mess around, play however you want, and I'm just going to start coloring in, alternating those petals with the light and the dark. All right, once you have that colored in, you do want to be careful that you don't rub on the copper embossing too much, because some of that ink may still be sitting on top of it until it dries a little bit. You can also use a tissue to kind of blot in a couple of spots, and we just want to let that dry for a little bit. So while that is drying, we're going to bring in our ribbon, our metallic edge ribbon from our paper pumpkin kit, and we're going to start coloring that. Now you could do an ombre effect with both a light and a dark, or you can do a solid color. I'm gonna try and do a little bit more ombre. I originally saw this tip in a demonstrator group I'm in from Patty Bennett, and she found it from one of her customers. So cool that we can share ideas and learn about different techniques with other demonstrators. So you can see how the brush end of those Stampin' blends just immediately change the color of that ribbon. It's so beautiful the way that that ribbon just soaks up that color, and it goes right through to the back, so you really only have to color one side. Now do be careful of your work surface when you are coloring these, because it will stain. Just make sure that if you are coloring on a surface that you don't want to get color on, that you put a piece of scratch paper or something similar underneath your area. So we're just gonna kind of alternate the light and the dark. I kind of like the ombre effect that we can get that way. And we're just gonna kind of blend them together right in the middle there. And then maybe just a little bit more, because we're not only gonna tie this around the middle of our stained glass window, we're also going to use the banner edges that are left over underneath our sentiment. So I wanna color a little bit more than I think I might need for the front of my card. So I'm going to set that aside to dry as well. Now as it dries, it will become a little bit stiff, but that's totally fine. Once it's dry, you'll be able to still manage to tie it into a knot or a bow. All right, we're gonna do a little bit more heat embossing, and this time we're going to use a small scrap of Whisper white cardstock to stamp our sentiment. So from the stamps that are included in the January paper pumpkin, and you could certainly use some other stamps. For example, we're using the Petal palette stamp set here. You could definitely use some sentiments from that. That would look beautiful with this card. But I am using the Be Mine because I'm making some special Valentine's cards. And we're going to stamp that with our Versamark watermark stamp pad. And then we're going to heat emboss that with copper. All right, we're also going to do some cutting on the Big Shot. So I have my Big Shot platform, big thin die adapter, and then a cutting plate on top of that. I'm going to cut out a label from this piece here. So I'm going to just trim off the edge and the bottom, just so that it sits nice and flat on my Big Shot surface here. We're using our Petals and More Thinlits dies, and for this we're going to use this beautiful label piece here. So let's set that down right there. Put a cutting plate on top and run that through. Alright, it's time to start assembling our card. So we're going to start with our stained glass window first. So to put this together, I'm using my mini glue dots, and on the back of my window piece, I'm going to put a glue dot in each of the little intersections on that window pane. So up in this corner, and then repeat that all the way around your window frame. Now we're going to take our stained glass piece and turn it upside down. So this is the back. We're going to glue the front of that to the back of our stained glass frame here. So they should be relatively the same size, so you should just be able to line that up and then stick it down. And then when you turn it over, you have your beautiful stained glass showing through the other side. Now we're going to take that ribbon that we colored earlier, and you can see that it's a lot stiffer. It's very stiff when you color it with those blends, but that's okay. I'm just going to take my finger and kind of run that across the ribbon, and it's not really inky anymore, so I'm not really worried about ink transfer. That alcohol ink in those Stampin' blends dries pretty quickly. So I'm going to tie that very carefully around my stained glass, and I want my knot to be on the left side. So we're just going to loosely, kind of at first, get that around there, and then gently tie your knot. And kind of flatten out that ribbon as you go, and don't tie it too tight. You don't want your window to warp on you. Okay, now you can see that's very loose, but that's okay. We're going to tack it down with some glue dots later. So I'm going to trim off the portion that I colored in. There we go. And I do want to trim this down a little bit more, and I'm going to save these little end tails that I'm snipping off because I can use those when I do my sentiment on the front of my card. So now we're going to take a couple of glue dots, and we're just going to tack down that ribbon. Now I want this to go right through the middle of my window, so we'll do the middle first. And then we'll tack down the right side. We're just going to kind of shift that ribbon out of the way while we position our glue dot. All right, we're going to do our sentiment now. So I'm going to scoot that out of the way for just a minute. And I have my label that I cut out of the card base from our paper pumpkin. I have my sentiment that I heat emboss using the paper pumpkin stamps. So I'm going to start by putting some dimensionals on the back of our sentiment, and I'm using the mini dimensionals here. The regular ones should be fine, but when you're working with something so small, you really don't want to have the adhesive showing through the front. So I'm just going to use my minis, and I'm going to place this right over to the right hand side. Okay, now I'm going to use a little bit of fast fuse on the back, and I'm just going to do a strip like this. I want my ribbon to be poking out through this side, so I'm going to pick up a glue dot on that ribbon, and we're just going to stick it right on the edge, just like that. And then let's angle this a little bit farther down this way, so you have a little bit of nice contrast like that. And now we're going to take our metallic thread, our black metallic thread, and we're going to do a few loops on the back of this guy here. And we're ready to get our card assembled. So we're going to get our bone folder and give our cardstock a crease in the middle here. And with our fast fuse, we're going to adhere down our white card mat on the front. And then on the back of this guy, we're going to use our dimensionals to pop it up. And I like having a white background behind my stained glass because then my images really pop out. You want to make sure that you use a light cardstock if you're going to use a colorful base. So now we're going to put our lovely little embellishment piece on the front, and because we have all of that linen thread across the back, I'm actually going to use a piece of Terran tape to not only hold down all of my thread, but also because it's a very strong adhesive and it will work really well to stick to the front of our card. We'll find our placement for that, and you can put it in the center, you can put it down. I think I'm going to keep mine pretty centered here. Let's see. I'm going to center the B mine right here on the center of my card, just like that. And the last step is to take either some pearls or rhinestones. I'm going to use what I have left of these purple enamel dots, rich raspberry enamel dots, and we're just going to put those on each of the window pane intersections here. So I'm going to start with the major ones because I don't think I have enough to do what I did on the first card. I think I went a little overboard on the first card, but it was so pretty and I just love using these enamel shapes and dots. So we're going to start with the major intersections on the corners here. And now I think I have enough to do 2, and I could do those 2, but that would be it. So I think I'm just going to put 1 on these large areas here. Okay, and I'm not going to worry about these 2 sides since my ribbon's kind of covering it. I think that is going to do it. And there we are, creators. There is our gorgeous stained glass window using some of the materials out of January's Paper Pumpkin Kit Heartfelt Love Notes. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial today. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave me a comment. Let me know what you thought of this card today. Are you going to try your own? Remember, you can make this window pane here using any punch or framelit and some cardstock. If you make your own, please make sure that you send me a copy of your photo. I would love to see how you recreated this card. You can get all the supplies that you need to create this card at melissascreations.com. Just click on Shop Now. If you are a current Paper Pumpkin subscriber, or if you sign up for a Paper Pumpkin subscription, you can get the refill kit for January. It is currently available on the website. As I am filming this video, you can grab that refill kit and you'll get the ribbon, the little enamel dots, and you'll get the labels, these beautiful cards, and all of the other accents that go inside that kit. You can also follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/Mkre8tions and on Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest with the handle at Mkre8tions. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this card, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!